It's Keith from Terra-x. Just a video on installing the fork parts in the new Xplor forks on the Huskies and the 17, 18 and 19 now KTMs. These forks are essentially the open chamber forks with a few changes. It's still got the same base valve. It doesn't have the compression adjuster in the base valve because they've added some different mid valve to one side to work the compression. It's a bit dubious about how much it works, but that's what they've done anyway. So the other major change that they've done is that they've added a removable spring perch, where the older forks were just the spring used to sit on the aluminium part of the cartridge. It's because of this part here that we can add this part here to lower the spring down, and we install a couple of spacers internally on the cartridge rod. So don't know if you can see this, but so that's what comes out of the fork. Our other video on the open chamber will show you how to take these forks apart. The principle is exactly the same. There's really not that much difference between them. When you install these parts and the spacers on the inside there, you'll end up with exactly the same preload as what was on the fork in the first place. If you've got the adjustable cap, preload adjusted caps, which I don't have on here, then that's no problem. You can just adjust it with those. If you want to change the preload, when you put these back together, you'll have to mess around setting the preload by either removing this spacer or whatever spacers come in your fork, or adding to them and adjusting the length of these to suit. I've got another video showing how to do that. This fork in particular came with 10mm preload. I took it down to about 6 by making these a little bit shorter. If you shorten any of these, you have to correspondingly move the fork up a bit in the triple clamp to compensate, to get the same lowering as the rear. So after the rear's been lowered, using our rear spacers here, the rear will be down about 33mm. So this is our shock spacer. It's a two-piece spacer. It's got a lip there, you may be able to see, and the circlip on the seal head sits in there when the spacer's together. This lip goes down into the seal head groove where the circlip came out. It's completely captive and can't come out. There's been a bit of talk on by a few people saying that external spacers can cause problems. There has been a one-piece spacer. If you imagine this with a chunk taken out of it, so you can slip it over the shaft, shock shaft, and then install it. Obviously, that leaves a space for the ring to compress and possibly pop out of the circlip. This cannot have this problem. It can't compress anywhere. It's solid one piece, very close fitting to the bore, and with these rings that lock into the original seal head, it just simply cannot go anywhere. So just thought I might mention that. And all of our spacer rings for all of our bikes are exactly the same as this. So to fit these parts, it's really very simple. Just bear with us a sec. So on the 17s, this comes off really easy. On the 18s onwards, they've put an O-ring in here. It's to stop the oil going up the shaft and making the hydraulic lock work a bit better. It just makes it a bit stiff to get over the threads in the shaft. So this is the part that we're going to replace. So we just want to take off that preload spacer, remove the perch, and then we're going to be putting this one just back in its place. On here's a little washer, little steel washer. I just leave that on there. Then before we put that back together, we need to slide the cartridge rod out. We need to install these spacers. Now the reason why there's two of these, this may get a little bit confusing, is that we also have this ring here. So with the EXCs being a bit high at the rear compared to the XCs, which are a bit flatter, a lot of people have been lowering the rear slightly to take that sort of stink bug stance of the bike out. So if you were, we developed this ring to go with this perch, because if you're one of these people that want to try and correct the geometry, you can install our shock spacer, get 33 at the rear, and then if you use this ring in conjunction with the perch spacer, you'll lower the front less, so the front will be down around 15 millimeters, and it'll give you a 19 mil bias, so the rear will be 19 mil lower, and the overall bike will be about 25 mil lower. Whether you choose to use that this way, is if you're going to use this ring and only do the front a small amount, then you only put one of these spacers on the cartridge rod. If you're going to get the full amount alone, which most people will do, that's probably why they're buying this kit, then you install two. It's pretty simple. So we take our two spacer rings, this is the mid valve on the rebound side, and we're just going to put them on there. And we're just going to reinstall in the cartridge. We'll just make sure this little washer I said is still on there. Install the new part, just like that. Leave the ring part off, and then you put your preload spacer, if you're going to use it, back on, and then when you reassemble the fork, everything will be 29 millimeters lower. So when you reinstall on the bike, you will want to keep the forks up in the triple clamps 3 to 4 millimeters, whatever ring you choose on the fork, outer fork tube. You just want to set it 3 or 4 mil higher to get the exact 33 mil, the same as the rear. There's a bit of variance, different bikes. Yeah, might need to just play around with that. And anyway, you just put the fork back together exactly the same way as it comes apart, same as the open chamber fork. Fill with oil, set the oil height, and put it back on the bike. You do the same thing to both legs. The compression leg has got it's a different system. It's got like a little sort of poppet valve inside there that does the compression. It's exactly the same principle. You just pull the rod out, put the spacers on, put it back in, and then you just basically put the fork back together, put the base valve in, and just watch our other video, and it will show you how that all works. Very simple really. It just means you do have to take the whole fork apart. Thanks.